Okay, great. So we are officially under the recording. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development's Baltimore Builds Workshop Series. Tonight is one of my favorites, which is pre-development. The presentation that you guys will hear this evening is presented by Mr. Eric Tiso, the Division Chief for Land Use and Design with Baltimore City Department of Planning. The format for tonight's event is there will be a presentation followed by question and answers. If you could, during the presentation, as you have questions, please include those in the chat and we will do our best to get to each of those questions. I do want to recognize with us today, Eric Lee, who is the Neighborhood Development Officer with Department of Housing and Community Development. We're joined by our Chief of Communications, Ms. Tammy Hawley, and our presenter this evening, Eric Tiso. So just want to give a little teaser. Our department for development we work with developers, home buyers, organizations that are interested in purchasing city-owned property. And this is a really exciting undertaking. Oftentimes we hand out rose-colored glasses because, as you can see behind us, some folks may see that image as not a pretty sight, and some may see it with a lot of potential. But one of the biggest pieces of planning is working prior to the construction, understanding zoning, understanding pre-construction phase. And tonight we're going to be able to get an overview of some of the steps to help us as we plan to put these development projects together. So again, I appreciate you all joining us and look forward to the question and answer period this evening. Eric, I'm going to turn this presentation over to you. Thanks again.
All right, thank you very much. And let's see if I can get my screen shared. And let me know once it is visible for you.
Yep, I am able to see. Thank you.
Okay, great. So again, I'm Eric Tiso, Chief of Land Use and Urban Design in the Department of Planning. So if you're looking at doing any practical development, chances are good it'll be coming through my shop. And I do have a second monitor set up where I have my slides. So if you see me looking off to the side, that's what I'm looking at. All right, so first thing to talk about is some resources. What is there that you can use? And frankly, what do we in the background in planning use as well? One of the biggest things that we have worked to provide is the City View webpage. It's an interactive mapping tool that has a lot of different information on it. I use this myself on a daily basis. Whenever I get a call for a pre-development meeting, first thing I do is open this site and then turn on the different layers to see what's going on in the background. Depending on where a property is located, and is it in a special plan area? Is it an urban renewal plan? Is it in a floodplain historic? Depending on what may be going on with that particular property, may change the review process for whatever it is that you'd like to do. So as an example, just zooming in a little bit more, you'll see along the left edge some of the mapping options. So under thematic overlay, there are two drop-down boxes. So you'll see the property information group is the first one, and there's several sub-lists under that. So I've turned on just the real property layer, but there's zoning information and things like that. So if I were to click on zoning current, it would then turn on this layer, which shows the different zoning districts, for example. In area C, where it says bring layer up front, if you click on one particular layer and then hit apply, it'll move it to the top. So the zoning layer is a full color shape and it'll cover everything below it. So I clicked on property information, hit apply, and that'll bring those property boundaries to the top. And then frequently what I'll do is that little slider bar just below the word apply, I'll move that to about half saturation so that it's, you can see through it a little bit more. You can't necessarily trust what you see on the ground. Okay, the zoning will enable the uses, your bulk requirements, how tall something can be, how close it can be to the property boundaries, what you can do use-wise on that property. especially in our residential neighborhoods where there are a lot of what we call non-conforming uses, which means they are uses that were allowed at some point in the past, but over the decades, it was no longer allowed in that district, but you're allowed to continue because you had it under the older set of rules. But once it lapses, then you've lost it. You have to follow the new rules. So passively over time, things should be catching up and meeting the requirements of the district in which it's in. So just because something looks like it had a commercial use in it, this is especially true in our row home neighborhoods, does not necessarily mean that it can be used for commercial things guaranteed. Now in our new zoning code, which we overhauled and made available, or got enacted in the middle of 2017, we did provide for some of that through our neighborhood commercial establishments. But basically, first thing to know is what is the zoning district of my property, and what does it allow? There's other layers that we frequently use, at least when I'm doing a quick background check on a property before I meet with somebody in a pre-development meeting. So again, there's two drop downs. So the top one is property information. There's that real property information. That's the property boundaries that I talked about. There's the current zoning layer. And then if you're interested in comparing it against our pre-2017 code, there's the former zoning layer there as well. If you choose the planning department upper layer, some of the subordinate layers there are CHAP, historic districts. Those are our local historic districts. Critical area, and that's within 1,000 feet of mean high tide line in the Chesapeake Bay. Our plan unit developments, our planning districts, we have 11 of those. You can see some of the subdivisions that we have mapped, and urban renewal plans. And the URPs, or urban renewal plans, they can affect what you can do on a property as well. So they can add or well, not add, but they can subtract uses, and they can have other requirements as well. And then also very important, depending on where you are, is the floodplain. Okay, beyond that, our department's webpage, Department of Planning, is a good one. And if you click on the resources tab, so our page would look like this. On the left side, you see that resources tab. Again, I'm on this page multiple times daily, providing people web links to the different things that are there. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of our review processes as we go. Depending on what it is that you're looking at doing, it may use some or all of these, and we'll give you advice on roughly what order you should consider doing them in. Some of our local reviews that are required by the zoning code include site plan review, design review, landscape review, and forest conservation. And this is where you find those manuals, as well as our subdivision regulations. Scrolling a little bit further down the page, there's our environmental things, and there's a link to the zoning code, and I'll show you another place to get that in a little bit. But I try and send some of this out to folks if I think it's applicable, so you can do a little bit of pre-reading, and that way you can come with a little bit more specific questions. Otherwise, as I tell people a lot, I can answer general questions generally, but until I know really what it is that you're looking at doing, I can't get too specific until I see that. Another good one is the Department of Legislative References webpage. So if you go to their webpage, this is what you'll see. If you click on that View City Charter and Codes Online, it'll take you to this page. This is where you can see the various city codes that are there. Building fire related codes are sometimes important to folks, keeping in mind that the International Building Code in its entirety is not here. It's just our local addendum. So you will have to have a copy of the IBC on your own. But then below that is a numbered articles. If you go all the way to the bottom of that list, there's a link for the zoning code. So our zoning code is now Article 32. And when we overhauled it, one of the things that I really, really wanted was to improve the usability of it. So I wanted to have tables. In our pre-2017 code, our permitted use lists were, here are the things that are permitted in the R1 district. Then in the R2 district, it would say everything that's allowed in R1 plus the following additional things. Everything in R3, 4, 5, 6. So it was this cascading list that you had to flip back through pages and pages to find what's the total list of things that I can do on this property. So by having a table, that makes it a lot easier. I want to do a home occupation in an R8 district. Can I do that? There's your answer right there. It's in the same chart. Aside from just the uses, we also have the bulk and yard regulations. This is the structure itself. How tall can it be? How much lot area is required? How close can you get to the property boundaries? Things of that nature. So that's what these bulk and yard requirements. So here's our lot areas required for residential. And then if you scroll down, I've only shown you cross sections of it here. It tells you more about the bulk things, like how much of the lot can you physically cover with a structure, impervious surfaces, and things of that nature. The next one, parking. There is a chart based on the use that you're looking at doing. How much parking do I need to provide? Well, for residential applications, it's 1 per dwelling unit. How big does it have to be and in what orientation? Here are some of the requirements that are there, as well as we added for the first time pictures. We wanted to have as many visual things to aid the reader as we possibly could. We used to have figures in there, but they ended up getting pulled out. So we're going to try and keep making that better to try and make the code as user-friendly and understandable for the everyday person as humanly possible. Many of you might have heard about the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals, or BMZA. If there is something that you're looking at doing with your property that doesn't fit the requirements of that district, whether it's a conditional use, and we actually have 2 flavors of conditional use, which is very, very unusual. As far as I can tell, I think Baltimore is unique in that we have 2 tracks. One that goes through a legislative authorization through the mayor and city council by way of a city council bill. Then there's the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals that approves another class of conditional uses. That's one group that the BMZA frequently sees. The other is variance hearings. So if you want to say, I want to add a 3rd unit in my 2-unit multifamily dwelling, but I don't quite meet the lot area requirement, or I would like to build an addition, but it would go over the maximum 35-foot height in this R8 zone. What can I do? Well, it would be a request for a variance through the BMZA. So that's where you have to justify to them that what you're asking for is necessary. It's the minimum deviation from the requirements of the zoning code. It's not just for convenience or profit, that it's in the interest of the public, these sorts of things. But it's a public meeting, public hearing. So while you would be saying, I need these things because, if there was somebody that was upset by that or aggrieved by it, they would have the opportunity to say, wait, this is a problem because, and they would use the same list of required findings that the board is supposed to consider to say why it's a problem, then the board makes a decision. If you see something in your neighborhood, especially if you belong to a community organization, you can monitor the traffic through the BMZA here, or you can look for the signs that go on the properties. Our department, my division specifically, supports the BMZA. We advise them on cases and we make recommendations where their staff will say, here's what the sphere of the board's ability is. We make recommendations on, in this case, here's what we think you should do and why. Okay, so that is kind of the background resources on things to look at before you come to the meeting, because that's what I'm going to be doing from my end before we get together. So what are pre-development meetings? Why do we even do this in the first place? So the purpose is really to help applicants and to help us. We want to increase the understanding of applicants of what the rules are, what the process will be, what's going to be necessary for different things as early as possible in the process. That makes it easier for us, because if we can help you understand what the process is, make a recommendation for what order to do things in, it makes it more efficient, both for you as well as for us. If we get a clean submittal that has everything that we need, we don't need to come back and ask for, other things. It's just faster and simpler. So who's involved? Well, it'll be the applicant, your team, could be your engineer, architect, landscape architect, planners, whomever you have that is working on your team. And then depending on the nature of the project, we will bring in whomever from our staff is necessary, whether it requires a floodplain approval or whether it's in a historic district or does it require an architectural design review, and the district planner for the area to be the liaison with the community. We try and bring together the right people to give you more or less a one-stop shopping advisory meeting of what's going to go into this. And then we give you a recommendation on what kind of processes are going to be involved. And then we might give you an order of operations that we think makes sense. So let's say you want to buy some property and subdivide it and build 10 new row homes. What's involved with that? Well, we would say we want to start with design review. and that might or might not, depending on the scope of the project, involve our Urban Design and Architectural Advisory Panel, UDAP, and I'll get into that later. Once the general feeling and massing is set, then it'll come to the Site Plan Review Committee. I happen to be the chair of that. It's an interagency group that reviews development and gives you technical advice at the concept phase, because again, we can prevent problems before they get expensive. Then it would go to the Planning Commission in a public meeting for the approval of the subdivision plan. Along that way, there might be subparts that get reviewed. For example, Site Plan Review Committee includes forest conservation, landscape manual requirements, things of that nature as part of the technical review. And then we'll give you a list of here's the order in which we think it makes sense to do things so that you're not getting hung up on waiting for something while something else is resolving to try and make your process as convenient as possible. One of our competitive advantages in the city is that we're generally faster in review processes than our surrounding jurisdictions. It's possible to get a subdivision through in sometimes 6 or 8 weeks, and the Baltimore County, it can take a year, year and a half. All right, so talked a lot about these development review processes. What are they? Again, depending on what you need, it'll depend on what process might get triggered and how that works. So I talked a little bit about design review. This is something that got formalized with our new zoning code, where before it was kind of done in the middle with other things, but it's now a formal requirement. Design review and our design review manual has certain requirements depending on where you are, what kind of structure you're doing. There will be certain design requirements for that. Depending on the scope of the project, it might need to go to our Urban Design and Architectural Advisory Panel, UDAP. This is typically, I'm redeveloping an entire city block, or I'm creating a new plan unit development, something substantial, 200 unit apartment building. That will tend to go through UDAP, and that's where we have that panel of 5 architects that will review it and provide their professional advice. And the goal is to make the project the best that it can be, for the duration. Yes, it's an extra step, but we've often found that applicants find that at the end, their project actually got better. Typically, after that first set of design review, we'll come to site plan review, and this is where you have technical folks, such as from within the different divisions of planning, Department of Transportation, Parking Authority, housing, fire, those kinds of agencies saying, okay, you need to change the driveway entrance to make it tighter so that cars aren't whipping into the school parking lot too fast, or hey, you need an access drive so that a fire truck can get to the back of this to reach the backside of the building, things of that nature. Then we have our environmentally sensitive areas review. This could be floodplain, critical area, things of that nature, as well as landscape review. Does it meet forest conservation? Does it provide landscaping as required? Some things require Planning Commission approval. Again, I mentioned subdivisions earlier. Planning Commission is the final actor or approval authority for subdivisions, but we're also sometimes in the middle. Whenever there's a legislative authorization, a city council bill, sometimes are referred to the Department of Planning, sometimes it goes to the Planning Commission. Usually those things are the ones that have more significant city master plan impacts, like street closures, plan unit developments, things of that nature. One of the other commissions that we serve is the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. So if you're in a local historic district, they will be doing the design review. Tied in with our technical reviews at site plan review, we also have DPW. We make that introduction for stormwater management, which is significant, and we want to detangle those requirements from some of our landscape requirements. We also work very closely with the Department of Transportation for their traffic impact studies, developers agreements, and curb cuts. Not a lot of people know that there's actually 2 permit systems in the city. One, the one you're probably thinking of that housing runs, which is anything inside of a property boundary. I want to build an addition on my house. But the other one is actually the rights-of-way permit system. So if you want to provide a driveway entrance to get to the new garage that you want to build, you need a right-of-way permit through the Invista system. And you need both of those in order to build the thing that you would like. I talked a little bit about legislative authorizations as the council bills are referred to us, and I talked about the BMZA. All right, at the end of all of these processes, eventually there will be a permit review. This is where everything comes together. Hopefully, if there's any concerns, it's been taken care of by this point in time. If you've gone through the various review processes successfully, when a permit is referred out, we should be able to cross compare and say, yes, this matches what I approved before, and I can push the button and you move on. So how does permit review? This is the incredibly sped up version. Baltimore City is a big, complicated place. I remember when they first were creating the digital permit review system, the fellow that was mapping the process with all of its loops and swirls, it was a multi-dimensional spreadsheet that was required. So there's a lot that goes on in the background, but we hope that it's seamless. But it'll more or less go like this. You'll start an application process online for whatever the permit is that you would like. Assuming that you're building something, it'll require a plan set. So the plans examining manager will do an initial review and they'll assign different review processes and different agencies for their review. Once they think they have everything that they need and they've tagged the different agencies, they'll release it into the wild in the permit system for the different agencies to do their reviews in parallel. So on the customer side, sometimes you may see that, oh, it looks like planning has had this in their queue for 2 weeks. Well, no. It was waiting to be released. I can't see it until that happens. So it might have been that the plans examining manager was waiting for one more critical piece of information before they could release it. So just know that there's a little bit of a difference in who can see what when. Once that happens, if it comes to a particular agency, let's say it's to planning, we may have a sub-review processes that we need to tag in. So there might be, oh, well, this is in forest conservation, but it wasn't caught. So I'm going to add that process, and we might add a couple people along the way. There's a neat feature in there, the message board, where you can communicate with different reviewers, and it keeps that in the system. Okay, especially for property owners, you should be able to view this. And that way you can see, you know, when your architect is complaining, oh, well, I've been waiting for the city, they're holding me up, it's been 5 weeks, you should call and yell at them. Well, yeah, I put a comment and a hold 3 weeks ago, and you just put something in yesterday, Mr. Architect, but that's on you, not on me. Evidence is there. But that works both ways. If it was put in and I've been sitting on it for 3 weeks, you know, that sort of cuts both ways. At the end, hopefully everything goes well. Once all reviewers have approved, it'll go back to plans examining and you'll have that final issuance of the permit. Keep in mind, once you pick up your permit, there is a lifespan on it. I believe typically that's 6 months. If you don't actually do the project, that permit can time out and you might have to go back through and try and refresh that or ask for an extension. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. We recommend reaching out to us as early as possible so that we can give you the benefit of our advice. Again, our goal is we want to be able to get to you before you've spent too much time and effort on details. That way, if I say, well, okay, it's nice that you want to do this, but if you just move that over here, it would meet all of our requirements and still do kind of what you want to do. You've just saved tens of thousands of dollars in engineering potentially, depending on the project. And that's what we want. It makes it faster for you, easier for us, and hopefully less expensive. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eric. The questions that were in the chat while your presentation was going on, I'll go ahead and read those, and then if there's any that continue to come in the chat, we'll address those as they come in. The first question was, how is the city view map related to code map, if it is at all? Okay,
there are, as I understand, there are maybe some layers that are shared in common. So this is where the magic of GIS is happening in the background. But there are different layers that are available that are more housing specific in CodeMap. The goal behind CityView was a more generic or general application citywide to kind of cross compare what's going to affect my property. You know, before we had that, there could be an urban renewal plan that would potentially say, well, a particular use is not allowed in this area, okay, because it had a use district. But somebody who didn't know that they were in an urban renewal plan would look in the zoning code and say, oh, what's fine there? But how did they know that they were actually in that plan area? Well, sometimes they wouldn't know until they've already filed for a permit, and that was the problem. So there's a little bit of overlap, but their purpose is really different.
Thank you, Eric. The second question, will these slides be available after the presentation? And I believe Teresa put in the chat that a recording will be available via the DHCD YouTube channel.
And I'd be happy to make a copy available if you want to post them somewhere.
Okay, great. Another question that came in is, can you talk more about what is PUD and why would a developer choose that option?
Sure. So plan unit development is designed to affect a larger area. Typically, a minimum of 2 acres of land is required, and it'll depend on what zoning district you're in. The idea there is it's usually multiple properties involved in that size of an area. And the idea is you want to offer flexibility in the development in exchange for a higher degree of public scrutiny. So let's say you want to build a new shopping center, okay? If you were to look at each individual property and have to apply the zoning code's requirements to each one, it might not make sense. So if you create a plan unit development through legislative authorization, so it takes a bill through the mayor and city council to establish that, and there's multiple hearings along the way, planning commission, several hearings at council before it gets to the mayor's desk for approval. It's going to be something that is specially tailored to that particular development and is durable over time. So if there's requirements that apply, let's say, there's uses that we remove, we could add flexibility for uses, certain design features that are required, public amenities that might be required, that's all incorporated in part of it. And whenever something comes in that's in a PUD, we will be reviewing it per the PUD rules in that ordinance, not just the general city rules. So that's why it's a benefit to both the public as well as to the applicant.
Okay, and next question. Can you share some of the common mistakes that you see during the pre-development review meetings?
Sure. So in a lot of cases, if you're able to do the homework in the background, which I just said that I typically do, looking, is the use that I want permitted in this zone? Can I achieve the density that I want in that area? That will head off a lot of the problems. What can be heartbreaking is when somebody's like, okay, well, there's this intersection in a row home neighborhood and all 4 corners are commercial, except that the one that they just bought and they're already, now saddled with hasn't been lawfully used as commercial and is not eligible anymore. That's tough. So just make sure that you know what the rules are before you get committed to something. When in doubt, just send me an email and say, hey, do you think I can do this here? Again, I can answer general questions generally. The more specificity you can add, the better. But forewarned is forearmed.
Thanks, Eric. For the next question, for a new developer, who should be the first consultant on your team?
Well, we are happy to work with anybody. So in some cases, it comes up to your degree of comfort. Do you need a lawyer? Do you need a planning consultant? It may come down to your personal comfort level. Are you okay representing the project, or would you like to have help with that? There are certain things where you just have to have an architect. You just have to have an engineer. You might need a surveyor. It will depend on the nature of the project. So and out of fairness, we can't recommend any particular firm or consultant. But what I would say is, if you're not sure who you might need, come meet with us. We can describe what the process will be in general. When you meet with that particular consultant and describe your project to them, they should be able to tell you similar stuff. They should be able to know, who we are and how the process works. That means they're familiar with our process and they'll be better able to do that. Now, of course, we're willing to work with out-of-town firms. We do it all the time. But especially for smaller projects, you don't necessarily want to be waiting for a new consultant who's not as familiar with us to be learning on your dime, as it were.
Okay, the next question. Are any nonprofits looking to use a property in Baltimore City, would they have to go through all of these processes?
Development is development regardless of who the applicant is. There's only one exception, and that's if you're the state of Maryland or the federal government. If you own the property, you're sovereign. And that's because zoning authority is delegated to subordinate jurisdictions from the state. Even then, the state typically will meet with us and go through local jurisdictions review process by policy. But otherwise, if you're developing something, same rules apply to everybody. In fact, there's other agencies like Parks and Rec. Before they build something, they're doing a pre-development meeting with us. They're going through some of the same processes that you would.
And so there's a follow-up to that question, and it is, what would be the first step?
The first step in pre-development?
Yes.
Well, I would say just email me, ask for a meeting. If you can include a basic description of where and what you're looking at doing, that will help me make sure that I can pull in the right people. And then we give you the advice and see where it goes from there.
Eric, did you put your email in the chat already?
I did not, but I can. I think I may need to stop sharing.
Here, let me, I can put it in.
Oh, okay. I think I already hit the button. Yes,
Eric.tiso, right?
Eric.tiso at baltimorecity.gov.
Okay, the next question. For small developers not familiar with Baltimore, is there, where exactly do we go to start the development process? Sort of a hand-holding location.
Okay, well, again, I recommend starting with a pre-development meeting so we can figure out what it is that you'd like to do, and then we can point you in the right direction. Assuming that it's just normal construction, we can aim you at the permits office to start that process, and then you'll be doing that. Now, if there's something special like through HCD, that may require additional pre-steps if you're doing competitive funding or something like that. It'll all depend on exactly what you're doing.
Okay. Does DHCD have local affiliated consulting firms that are associated with DHCD?
I think that's more a question for your shop.
Yeah, but the same thing with planning. We can't recommend any particular consultant work with a developer. We'll work with your consultant. It is possible that we can give a list of consultants that that we've worked with in the past, and if that would help, we can probably provide that list. And next question, how often is the pre-planning provided or offered to the community?
Well, we're happy to answer any questions from the community. In fact, just last week, a community organization reached out to me saying, hey, we're working with a fellow who approached us first, and he wants to do a parking lot and what's required. So they were trying to help the applicant as well as represent the community's interest. So we were giving them the same advice that we would to the applicant, because rules are the same, but that way they would know where and how they can get involved and what the different roles will be. So we're happy to advise the community as well so that you can participate. And the other thing that I will put a commercial, the Community Law Center has some good guides for community organizations. And I helped them, I was pre-COVID, so perhaps a year and a half, 2 years ago, to update those processes so that community organizations can understand the development process as well, so that they can engage meaningfully. For the developers in the room, we recommend talking to your adjacent property owners and formal community organizations as early as possible, even if it's not going to end up going to a public meeting. Establishing that goodwill up front is very helpful, especially if later on a change that you're looking at doing will take you into a public meeting. That way you'll have that rapport with the community and you'll be going in hopefully on good terms, and it won't be a combative thing. Letting people know what's going on, avoid surprises. Boring hearings are good hearings.
Next question. Do you need to have purchased a property first before setting up a meeting? And is there a timeline to develop properties after the purchase?
Okay, I would recommend if there's any way possible to not get committed to buying a property until you've had some basic questions answered. You don't want to buy something or get committed to something that you can't use for what you want. Okay, there are several meetings that we hold where, and even into technical reviews, where somebody is still in a pre-purchase phase, and they negotiated that timeline with the seller of, we have a due diligence period to make a decision, and then they will even run their designs through technical reviews to see if it's feasible. Especially if you're doing, for example, multifamily building, the number of units has to pencil out. If you can't make it work financially, you don't want that property. And sometimes I've seen a property that's right on the edge of costing, where we'll meet with 4 different people before one of them can figure out how to make it work.
And the follow-up question is there a timeline to developing properties after the purchase?
Not that I'm aware of. As long as you keep it clean and meet the applicable codes, I don't think so.
So I know that at DHCD with our Vacants to Value program, when you purchase city properties, we do have a timeline of 12 months to complete the projects. 12 months, there has been extensions given based on circumstances, but generally 12 months for when you purchase city-owned properties.
I do know there are some competitive funding processes, especially around senior assisted living, that have incredibly short time frames, and usually those projects are full throttle right from the gate because they have to demonstrate to the state that they're viable or they're not eligible for competition.
Next question is, how do we find out more about the Vacants to Value program? I can put the link in the chat, but if you go to the Baltimore City DHCD website, you'll see the Vacants to Value program. And does that reference to 12 months to fully develop apply to properties from commercial receivership? I have to find out for you. I don't have the answer to that question right now. So I will find that answer out, and that's Janet Evelyn will get that information to you. I can say that depending upon the project, Baltimore City Department of Housing Community Development will enter into what they call a LDA land disposition agreement, and those terms will be laid out specifically in the land disposition agreement. Are there any more questions? Okay.
Yeah, Eric.
Yes.
There's the one, I think you skipped over the one. How does the one house at a time work with the development plan team?
Okay, I didn't see that. How does OHAT work with development plan team? Eric Tissot.
Good question. I'm not familiar with that particular program. So if that's a housing program, unfortunately, I don't know. But assuming that you're just doing single property redevelopment, from where I sit, it would be a development project like any other. If there's any specific program requirements for timeline or ability tests, that I can't answer, but otherwise it'd be a development review like any other. If it's just rehab and it's not a historic property, you may not actually see my shop at all.
So OHAT, as for those who may or may not know, one house at a time, facilitates the auction of properties that the city has filed receivership on. And they go to a public auction in which developers have the opportunity to purchase the property. And I believe that OHAT also has a time frame of 12 months for completion of the rehab. And usually on smaller projects like single homes or even multiple single family homes, development may not be needed in situations like that. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, if it's just rehab, for example, and it's not in a historic district, not in an urban renewal plan where there's a special requirement, it could just be you're filing, permits and it'll go through and may not even be referred to us. Now, if you're doing a roof deck, if you're doing a vertical addition, something like that, that might come through maybe just for design review. Again, depending on the scope and exactly where it is, but that would probably be on the minimal end.
Okay, next question. If you purchase a vacant value property, is it 1 year to complete or 1 year to begin the process of building? It's 1 year to complete after settlement. After you have possession of the home, it's 1 year to complete the rehab. And then from Orlando, tried the Vacant Value website several times. Who can I meet with to better understand and navigate? Orlando, please reach out to me. Again, my email is ericp.lee@baltimorecity.gov, and I'd be happy to help you navigate the process. And can you disclose the development plan processes website again?
Okay, I'm not sure which one. There were a few that I was talking about, whether it's Department of Planning's webpage, there was the resources link, there was the City View website. I talked about a few there. Maybe email me with a specific question and I can try and aim you where you need to be. Unless what you might be talking about is we used to have an online application for a pre-development meeting. That is gone. If you have an old link for that, don't use it. When the city got hit with a ransomware, it was a piece of legacy software. Ransomware broke it. It's unrecoverable. And so we're not using it anymore. Just send me an email and we can schedule a meeting.
Next question. Do we have to use an architectural drawings to submit for permits, or can we use software of our own, like IT professional, instead of spending thousands on an architect?
So it's my understanding that you're going to need to have certain requirements. Plans examining will be able to tell you what their exact requirements are, and it may differ based on, are you just building a shed or are you building a building? There are certain licensure requirements, and there's certain things that they need to see to scale. And so plans examining office will best advise you on how to do that.
As an owner, how can I check that my contractor has submitted a request for a permit?
So if it is, and I'm just a reviewer in the middle, so I'm not as proficient from what the customer sees on the customer's end. If it is a plan set, in other words, it's bigger than I think 600 square feet, and it's going through the e-plans system, you should have an e-plan number, which would be the year like 2021 dash and a sequential number. With that, as an owner of a property, you should be able to log into the system and see where things are. You should be able to see the holds, see the agency comments. That's the whole point behind that. And that way, again, it's for accountability both on our side and on yours, so you can see where the concerns are. Again, I don't know it as much from the public side, so I would say try with a one-stop shop or with plans examining, and they should be able to help you with that.
From Kevin Fitzpatrick, he attended the Zoom meeting last week, but still struggling with the use of CodeMap. Is there someone I can speak with to get a better understanding? I can help you with that, Kevin, if you, again, ericp.lee@baltimorecity.gov. Email me and let's set a time where we can go over CodeMap together.
And I would also recommend if he wants to spend time on there's several training sessions on CodeMap on our YouTube channel. Sorry, and you can pick that up just by going to our website and you'll see the link to YouTube.
Okay. This one has just submitted. Okay. There was a presentation earlier this week about CodeMap. It was great and it was recorded. Okay. Thank you, Janet. The website name, please. Are you, Evelyn, are you making reference to the YouTube channel? Okay.
DHCD at baltimorecity.gov is where you can find the YouTube link and our Facebook link and our Twitter link. And by the way, please follow us.
I think you have to say click like and subscribe. I think it's obligatory, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Shannon is stating that the permit search only shows current permits. Is there a way to see submissions that are in process?
Good question. That's some background detail that I'm not super familiar with. I know that some things, like if it's Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals appeal, it is entered into the system like a permit. So the format for those is it'll be 3 letters, like COM for construction permit, use for use permit, DEM for demo permit, BMZ for BMZA, 4-digit year dash 5-digit sequential number. So yeah, somebody posted the permit lookup webpage a little bit higher up in the chat comments. That's a good place to search by property address if you think something's going on. So if it's a zoning appeal that's in process, it would pop up as pending and not scheduled. But as to exactly when an applied for permit shows up, that'll be a question for the one-stop shop.
Okay, is there a timeline for a home to be remodeled? We just purchased the home and literally got 2 notices from the Oliver inspector 5 days later, and we just got the demo permit. I'm not sure if you purchased it from a private owner or if you purchased it from the city. If you purchase it from the city, we do have a timeline of 12 months for the completion of rehab. If it's from a private owner, then there is a lifespan on the permits, but they can be extended. But usually you have during the lifespan of that permit to complete the work. I hope that answered your question. Okay, it was saying 90 days complete the house, shocking, private owner. Okay. Usually, as far as I know, you have the time of the permit before it expires to complete the work. And they do allow for extensions if circumstances have not allowed you to complete the work by the time the permit expires. I have seen extensions granted. And we've put our emails in the chat. Again, it's eric.tiso@baltimorecity.gov or ericp.lee@baltimorecity.gov. And for questions that we are not able to answer tonight, we would be willing to get the information for you. Just reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you. Question, if a permit is expired, how long does it take to renew and show up on the site? I don't have that answer. I don't work in the permit office. I'd be happy to find out for you. But if it's expired, Eric Tiso, do you have any knowledge whatsoever on that?
Yeah, that's background stuff that I don't see. There are times where I will see a new permit number that will come through that references an earlier permit. Some can be just extended. In other words, they can revive the existing permit, and other times they'll just make reference to an old one. How that division gets done, unfortunately, I don't know. That's probably a good question for the one-stop shop.
You mentioned that we recently did a series on permits called Permit Like a Pro. And you will find that series of workshops also on the YouTube channel.
All right, next question. Has it been difficult to reach vacant to value office during COVID? Oh, it has been difficult to reach vacant to value office during COVID, which is understandable. Is the office open now? We are still operating virtually and from our home offices. If you go to our DHCD website and there's a link on how to buy city-owned properties. There's also links to the respective neighborhood development officers for each of the 5 regions in Baltimore City. And so please go to our DHCD website, go to the link on how to buy a city-owned property, and it will show you the various regions and the respective neighborhood development officers. Again, on questions of vacant to value, please feel free to reach out to me. And if it's not in the region that I am responsible for, I will direct you to the person who's responsible for the areas that you're interested in. Next question, what is the one-stop shop? Eric?
Sure. For those that may remember before pandemic times, if you've walked into our building at 417 East Fayette, they were the room, the first one on your left. So that was where you could initiate a permit process, and it was intended to be just that, a one-stop opportunity to get questions answered. And then if you came in our front door and went instead to the right, that's the plans examining office. They have the building code experts there, and any plan sets that would go in circulation, they would handle. So any of those permit intake questions would be handled by the one-stop shop. I put the e-permits webpage for housing in the chat, and that should get you closer.
Next question, does the city donate property? No, the city does not donate property, but we have negotiated very, I think, favorable sales amounts depending on the situation. The city does accept donated property.
I think you might also get close on an adopt a lot program with side yards. So if you have like an end of row building, but there's a vacant lot on the corner, you can adopt it, maintain it, and there's some agreements there that you have to do a good job. So that might be close as well.
Yeah, the prices on the side yard application, Eric is right, are very reasonable. If the side yard adjacent to the homeowner is, I believe it's 1,500 square feet or less, the price is $500. If it's over 1,500 square feet, then there's incremental increases, 500, and then incremental increases based on the number of square footage. And so very reasonable. There is a different pricing structure if it is a renter and the landlord wants to adopt or to purchase a side yard. There's a different pricing structure for that. That can also be found on our website at DHCD. Well, it's 6:25, and so I don't see any more questions coming in the chat. I want to thank everyone for attending and participating in this workshop series, the pre-development workshop series. I want to especially thank Eric Tissot from the planning department and his expertise in sharing with us the process necessary for going into pre-planning. I also want to thank Tammy Hawley for setting this workshop up. She's with our communications department, marketing communications. She'll correct me if I'm wrong with that, but she's the one who facilitated all of the technical aspect of this virtual workshop. I think there was one last question. What about it is the lot? What if the lot is a private owner? So if it's a private owner, then that you're looking to purchase the lot from, then you would have to try and contact that private owner. The city only is responsible for the city-owned properties, vacant lots, and properties. And so oftentimes when you go to SDAT, the State Department of Taxation, Assessment of Taxation, you'll be able to find out who the owner is and their mailing address. And that's SDAT.
Right on Code Map too. And the SDAT link is on Code Map.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone and want you to have a pleasant evening. Tammy, do you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you at our next workshop, which is scheduled for next Wednesday, 5:30 to 6:30. And we'll see you. Please register for that workshop. Thank you very much.
Okay.